Hello, and welcome to today's Zigbee Alliance webinar, Zigbee Home Automation 1.2, Delivering Peace of Mind Through Secure and Energy-Efficient Homes. Next slide. Before we get started, please note that this presentation is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the Zigbee website a few hours after the webinar concludes. Everyone registered today will receive an email with a link to the webinar recording and presentation. To ensure the highest quality audio, all attendees have been placed on mute. However, you can ask questions using the question and answer box on the webinar control panel. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentations. Next slide. Here is our agenda for the event. Ryan Maley, the Director of Strategic Marketing for the Zigbee Alliance, will give us an introduction to Zigbee Home Automation 1.2, followed by Ivan O'Neill, who's the Technical Standards Manager with iControl Networks, and will present the features and benefits of the standard. Thereafter, Fabio Bellifamine, who is a Senior Project Manager with Telecom Italia, will talk about the Energy at Home initiative, its relationship with Zigbee, especially Home Automation 1.2, and share some early lessons and results. Finally, Ezra Hale, who is a Software Systems Engineering Manager at Silicon Labs and is also the Chairman of the Home Automation Working Group in the Zigbee Alliance, will talk about implementing Zigbee Home Automation 1.2. And now, here is your first presenter, Ryan Maley.
Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining us. We are very excited today to be talking about the latest release of Zigbee Home Automation, the premier standard for home automation around the world. And on the next slide, you can start to get a feel for what Zigbee Home Automation is. It is a standard which allows you to connect your home with the widest possible range of devices to improve the comfort and security of your home. And today we're going to be talking about some of the newest features of 1.2. On the next slide, please. Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 is a tested and proven standard for connecting devices in the home. It has been deployed in millions of devices around the world, and not just in home environments, but in hospitality environments such as hotels. We have, because of those deployments, our member companies implementing the standard have learned quite a bit about the new requirements for connected homes, and in the Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 process have done a lot of interesting things, including enhancing definitions of certain devices, improving energy management, in particular with the Energy at Home initiative. And we've also done quite a few basic technical improvements that will make installation and upgrading your connected home network much easier. And during the course of this webinar, we will be talking about more of these in detail. Next slide, please. Zigbee Home Automation, like all Zigbee standards, is designed for device-to-device communication. And very specifically, the Zigbee Alliance is focused on meeting the requirements of the home so that you can be assured that your devices and your networks in your home will be reliable. To that end, it uses the basic networking of Zigbee Pro, which has very low power use, features scalable networks, up to thousands of nodes in a single network. It uses mesh networking for reliability in case of a single failure, a single device fails in a Zigbee Pro network. The mesh will actually route messages around that failed network to ensure that the messages are getting through your network appropriately. And of course, another great feature of the mesh network is that it extends the geographic coverage of your network. Even if one particular device is not in direct communication with another, it can use the mesh with intermediate nodes to communicate, and thus providing quite a bit of very reliable coverage over a wider area. And of course, like all Zigbee networks, Zigbee Home Automation using Zigbee Pro is self-configuring, so that as you install large networks, you do not have to worry about defining individual addresses and nodes, etc. This self-configuration is quite critical for device-to-device networks and is a feature of all Zigbee Pro standards. Of course, the Zigbee Home Automation is an application-level standard, and we have defined many of the devices that consumers need. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more later, but certainly the basics of appliances, thermostats, door locks, lights, and other things necessary for security systems are already defined in Zigbee Home Automation, and you have assurance that those devices that have been Zigbee certified will communicate with other devices in your connected home. Next slide, please. I just want to talk for a moment about the benefits of the Zigbee Alliance. And Zigbee Home Automation was defined by an organization with a global reach. We are a global open standard. Our standards are available for free. And you can see on this slide, it's a little difficult to read perhaps, but the Zigbee Alliance has over 400 members, many of which are making products in home automation and other standards. But this gives you a global reach for these products. It allows a wide range of choice of different products, and it allows for competition among products. The competition can be based on the quality, it can be on the features and innovation within the product, and of course there is significant price competition within the ecosystem of the Zigbee Alliance, all of which gives you more choice as either a consumer who wants to have a choice among end devices, or as a product developer who might want a choice among the different radios, hardware, and software platforms that would be available. Next slide, please. So this is just a very brief introduction. Again, thank you for joining. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to remind you that you can submit your questions via the chat function of the webinar. We will, at the end of the presentation, try to cover as many of these questions as we can. But before we get to that, obviously, we'll get through the rest of our speakers, and I would like to introduce Ivan O'Neill, the Technical Standards Manager of iControl, to discuss the features and benefits in more detail. Ivan?
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. My name is Ivan O'Neill, and as Ryan mentioned, I work for iControl Networks as its Technical Standards Manager. iControl makes the open home platform that powers the industry's leading home security and automation systems in the market today. And I'm excited to share with you all the great new features of Zigbee Home Automation 1.2. I'm going to move pretty quickly and just touch on the highlights. We'll have more time later for questions if you have any. All right, let's go. Next slide, please. One of the coolest new features and an industry first for home automation is the ability to pair devices without a gateway or centralized controller. We call it Easy Mode. And with Easy Mode, you can pair light switches and light bulbs with one button push, and you can also set up three-way lighting scenarios for larger rooms where one switch can be updated on the status of another switch, all in a really easy way. And the best part is your Easy Mode device is fully compatible with more advanced whole home systems that can take over Easy Mode switches automatically without the need to recommission. And Easy Mode is a Zigbee-only feature that dramatically lowers the price point to connect your world. On the next slide, we've added remote firmware updates in Home Automation version 1.2. And this is Zigbee's standard remote firmware update feature that enables any device to be updated remotely over the air in an interoperable way. And service providers, that means that service providers can deploy Home Automation version 1.2 devices with the knowledge that they can address any defects that may come up or add features over time. And consumers can invest in Home Automation version 1.2 products and be assured that they'll be able to upgrade to support future home automation features as they come out. Next slide, please. So wireless devices need wireless power, and until they figure out power beaming, that means you've pretty much got to use batteries. So nothing is more annoying than changing batteries, and Zigbee Home Automation version 1.2 adds support for the pole control cluster, which extends battery life by adjusting the amount of time between check-ins to maximize battery life and maintain a responsive user experience. And with pole control, we're seeing HA devices with really impressive battery life. You might even forget your devices are battery powered. Next slide, please. And another industry first, Zigbee Home Automation version 1.2 supports smart appliances with the new Energy at Home clusters. And because we'll be going into more detail about Energy at Home later in the presentation, I'll just highlight that utilities and service providers now have another option to help consumers manage their electricity costs in a user-friendly way. Next slide, please. While Zigbee Home Automation has supported door locks since 2005, Home Automation version 1.2 significantly upgrades the capabilities and adds support for RFID cards, and yet another industry first. You'll no longer have to carry your keys because Zigbee Home Automation version 1.2 supports thousands of unique user pins or RFID cards. You can set up schedules to limit who can unlock the door and at which times, and you can track who is coming and going and when. And we also have the ability to configure language, volume, timeouts, and vacation modes. Next slide, please. Like door locks, thermostats also get a major upgrade with Zigbee Home Automation version 1.2. We've standardized schedule programming so that any thermostat can be programmed from any controller with unique schedules for every day of the week. We've also added support for thermostat management services that can help consumers optimize comfort and save money and energy by providing operational metrics on the thermostat's state. Finally, thermostats can now be remotely locked down so their settings can't be tampered with. And we've provided some disclaimers there, so please use with caution. Next slide, please. Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 allows consumers and service providers to offer all Zigbee home security and automation systems. It supports a comprehensive suite of security and life safety devices, and this is unique because other popular home wireless standards can't do this. They typically have to mix multiple different technologies in order to offer home security and automation. And keypads, one of the new features in HA 1.2, keypads can now get updates from the security panel on the status of the system, and we can now also support alarms with strobe lights for the hearing impaired and other users. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we're showing all of the backers of Zigbee Home Automation, and I think that's the best part about Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 is that it's backed by leading service providers and name brand manufacturers from around the world, and it's already being deployed today in the field. Next slide, please. As with all Zigbee certified devices, they undergo rigorous testing and certification to ensure true interoperability. We have 19 golden units. These are the first devices that are certified. And amongst those, we have light switches, dimmers, window cover controllers. We got thermostats, temperature sensors, security sensors, door locks, smart plugs, appliances, and more. So as you can see, there's a whole complementary suite of devices that are already certified HA 1.2, with many more to come. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up, as you can see, Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 is a significant advancement for the smart home that enables affordable, interoperable, easy-to-use home security and automation. Thank you for your time and attention. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Fabio, who will tell us more about Home Automation 1.2 support for Energy at Home features.
Thank you, Ivan, and good afternoon from Italy. So I'm Fabio Bellifemine. I'm a project manager in Telecom Italia, and I am the director of the Energetom Association. So it's my pleasure to be here at this webinar, and first of all, I want to thank Zigbee Alliance organizer for inviting me to talk about this fruitful story of collaboration between Energetom and Zigbee Alliance, and about how we have already started to use this new standard from Zigbee family. So next slide, please. Let me briefly introduce the Energetom initiative. So it is a non-profit association. It is registered under the Italian laws. And the goal that we have is to create the basis of a new market of so-called post-meter value-added services. What we mean is customer-centric services for home energy efficiency based upon the communication with the smart meter, as well as down to all the household appliances. The association counts today 18 members, including telcos, ICTs, companies, white good manufacturers, energy companies. So the list is here. You can see the logos. The activities that we do is not just technical specification, but also execution of trials, and very important, the analysis of the impact of the regulation framework. On the bottom, you can see the website of our association. So next slide, please. So why we selected Zigbee? A few years ago, we analyzed several available technologies for home area network communication. We did a comparative analysis, and we concluded that Zigbee was, and I think still it is, the best available communication technology to fit the purposes of interoperability between home devices. So why? Here is a short list. For the cost, because it's an energy-aware technology for low power consumption device, because it's robust and effective in signal-to-noise ratio, but very important because it provides standard application profiles. These are really a must for an effective interoperability up to the application layer. So we signed a liaison agreement with Zigbee Alliance. We started a deep collaboration to produce this new standard, and so here we are. So next slide, please. So we have this Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 standard that provides an integrated framework for home applications, as Ivan said, including energy, automation, comfort, securities, and others. So what is the value proposition that we see in this? From the customer point of view, it is a way to have an integrated ecosystem of applications, devices, and appliances, a seamless experience from unlocking the home door, disarming the alarm, managing the home, the lighting, programming the thermostat, the energy, and whatever. So not 10 different applications from 10 different vendors, but a single seamless application that controls devices from 10 different vendors. So along the same line, not 10 different home boxes, one gateway for home security, one for lighting, and one for energy, but a single home gateway able to support an extensible plethora of services and devices. If I then look from the service provider point of view, the value proposition is in the benefit of a globally tested, well-proven standard which enable product competition. Very, very important to us is the certification program of Zigbee with independent test houses. That is the key enabler when wishing to create an ecosystem. So next slide, please. So having said that, these are the devices that we have already implemented and integrated in Energetom. First of all is the Enel Smart Info. Smart Info is the name that Enel gave to this device. It is, from a Zigbee point of view, is a meter interface device. It communicates via power line with the smart meter that is already deployed by Enel. In Italy, we have 100% of smart meters already deployed. And on the other side, it communicates via Zigbee Home Automation with the house devices. It is really a do-it-yourself device because the customer has just to plug into any home electricity socket. It gets univocally associated to the customer meter and it works. reports makes available all the data, consumption data, generation data for prosumer, and all the contractual data. It is really an enabling device for the Energy at Home ecosystem because it's compatible with the meters that have been already deployed, so no need to change the meters. So next device, next animation, is our gateway. So the Smart Info is the enabling device, the enabler of the ecosystem. Let me say that the gateway is the focus of the ecosystem. So it's the coordinator of the home area network. It implements the ZigBee Trust Center. It implements all the logics, all the application logics for the energy management system, for connection to the cloud and the web interface. Next animation. Next device is Smart Plug. FlexGrid is one of the companies in the Energy at Home ecosystem. It's a device with an on-off switch, electricity measurement, and it acts as a ZigBee router. It also has one button and two LEDs to alert users in case of problems. So last device, next animation, yeah, thank you, is the Smart Appliance. So far we have a washing machine that implements the ZigBee Home Automation standard from Indesit company and from Electrolux. Thanks to the communication with the meter and the gateway, this white good can provide an enriched experience on the user display, including visualization of the cost of the washing cycle and other information such as the house consumption. The washing machine can receive messages via the ZigBee radio and can react to these messages, such as the price of the energy, so selecting the best time and avoiding off-peak tariff, the availability of renewables, or also power overload to help customer to stay below the contractual power. Next slide, please. But in my opinion, yeah, the most relevant feature is the so-called power profile. So the white good can describe its power demand via ZigBee messages as a vector of power phases, where each phase is schedulable and is uninterruptible. And is described in terms of these four fields: the expected duration of the phase, the peak power consumption, the expected energy consumption, and the maximum activation delay. By setting this activation delay, the gateway can schedule each phase of the cycle. To complete the picture, on the left side, you can see the other functionalities, which includes the identification of the appliance, controlling and monitoring the state of the appliance, events related to faults and warning, and also transmission of statistics, white good specific information, such as statistics about usage. So next slide, please. This ecosystem of devices that I have described so far is now in trial. And we are testing a significant part of the ZigBee standard. So the first trial that we have is in Italy. Telecom Italia, Indesit company, and Enel Distribuzione are running this trial. 50 private houses with about 20 prosumers installed a washing machine, a ZigBee washing machine, a Smart Info that communicates with the smart meter, the gateway, and 5 plugs. And the function points that we provide to our customers are awareness about energy consumption, including awareness about the cost of energy, and a breakdown of the consumption of the cost, so per device. Scheduling according to energy price and according to availability of sun, to sun forecast. Overload warning, remote access, and comparison of occupant behavior, so-called social comparison. Another trial that is being run in Netherlands is in the bottom part of the slide, is run by Enexis. Enexis is a utility in Netherlands, and is using the same washing machine from Indesit and very similar function point. So next slide, please. So I said about social comparison, and this is the first result that I decided to share with you in this webinar. So probably some of you knows that several studies show that occupant behavior can have an even bigger impact in energy saving than the efficiency of the building itself. So the problem is how to change, how to engage users, how to motivate them to change. And we doubt that a simple web interface that shows consumption data is sufficient to motivate them. So what we did is we tried to design a persuasive feedback type of stimuli. So putting people in comparison against each other. So these graphs are example of what we show to our customers. So each bar represents a user, and each user knows his bar or her bar, and in the upper side each bar represents the energy consumption, the weekly energy consumption in comparison with the others. On the bottom part is the energy consumption of the washing machine. So next animation. And here there is a sample of feedback that we got from our trialist. So this feedback is about the value of energy awareness. Read the second sentence, for instance. Since when I saw the consumption of my PC, I never lit again switching on when I don't use it. So, or the first one, I'm pleased that I saved 3.8 kilowatt hour this week. So it's a new experience for customers. Next animation. The second group of feedback that we showed is about social comparison. And it's funny that at the end we remain big boys, and we like a lot gaming and comparing with the others. So read, for instance, the second sentence, the last sentence in the slide. So he said, so we attempted to reduce cost using off-peak times, but we didn't get small cost saving. However, I'm very satisfied in seeing that the other participant consumption, because I'm in the middle of the classification. Even, of course, I could be pleased to further improve my position. So social comparison is a motivation. And as a matter of fact, we measured that saving after sending this type of stimuli. So last slide, please. So last slide is about the importance of remote monitoring tools. As soon as the deployment grows to hundreds of thousands of customers, even a do-it-yourself solution needs tools to provide remote support to customers. So it's a very important lesson that we got. The good thing is that this ZigBee standard provides all the hooks in the gateway to implement remote monitoring tools, to monitor the functioning of the network, and to make diagnosis of malfunctions when needed. Peritons is an example of this tool, but in the good tradition of ZigBee standard, there is a good competition even in this market segment. So the lesson is go ahead with the deployment of this great standard and this ecosystem of ZigBee devices, but don't forget to have the proper supporting tools. So that concludes my section. I encourage you to make a question, to ask for more clarification. And it's my pleasure now to leave the webinar to next speaker, Ezra Hale, who is the chairman of the ZigBee Home Automation Working Group. Thank you.
Thanks, Fabio. Yes. As Fabio mentioned, I'm Ezra Hale. I am the ZigBee Home Automation Group Chair for the ZigBee Alliance, and I'm also a software engineering manager here at Silicon Labs. I was previously at Ember Corporation, which was purchased by Silicon Labs about a year ago in July. And so I've been technically with Silicon Labs and working on the ZigBee specification for the last 10 years. I have been the Home Automation Group Chair for the last 2 years. Next slide, please. So one of the nice things about ZigBee Home Automation 1.2 and about ZigBee in general is that it's an open standard and that anybody can become involved in the development of the standard. So we had probably, as Ryan mentioned, there are over 400 companies that are involved in Zigbee in general, and of those companies we had probably about 40 companies that were directly involved in the development of HA 1.2, Home Automation 1.2. And this leads to a wide variety of protocol software and chip vendors and multiple tool chains and a wide variety of end device products, all which are forced into interoperation through the certification process. But it ultimately leads to a lower cost to the consumers and a much more choice for application developers and device developers. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there are solutions for Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 which are available from multiple vendors. We had 3 different software vendors at the Home Automation Specification Validation event that were represented. These were the actual chip and stack vendors, in addition to the 40 some odd other actual application development vendors. So the stack vendors who were there at the specification validation event include Silicon Labs, Texas Instruments, Freescale, and of course there are other stack vendors who also offer Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 compliant stacks and chip solutions, and but who perhaps weren't at the actual specification validation event. But all of this competition leads to a much more robust set of features and a much lower cost for consumers. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about some of the tools and also some of the application details associated with implementing Zigbee Home Automation 1.2. Specifically, I'm going to look at 2 of the tools that were used at the specification validation event. The first tool is the Silicon Labs Ember Desktop, which includes an application builder, which is a GUI interface that allows you to use, simply point and click and build an application on the fly. And it also includes a network analyzer that allows you to see your application in action, and allows you to see actual packets, as they fly through the air and go between devices. In addition to this, I'm going to present the Ubiqua network analysis tool, which was also used at the specification validation event and is offered by Ubilogics. So both of these tools are built to support Home Automation 1.2. Next slide, please. So this slide gives you a little bit closer view of the Ember Desktop tool. I'll just run through the various features that you can see here on the screen. The first, at the very top, you have a search feature, so you can put in a search. You can use our search language to enter some search terms that will allow you to find and filter on the specific packets that you're interested in. Underneath that, we have the map view, which shows all of the network traffic over time. So you can see all of the packets as where there are specific large numbers of large amounts of network activity and where there's relatively small amounts of network activity over the course of your entire capture. Underneath that, we have the map view, where you can see these little dots with the arrow moving between them. That is the map view, and it allows you to see the actual nodes on the network, and you can see how traffic moves between them over the course of your capture. Underneath that, we have the transaction view, which is unique to Ember Desktop and allows you to see the packets as they are grouped into transactions. So any given transaction, for instance, a read attributes transaction or a read attributes response, may involve up to 4 or more actual packets. Those are grouped into the transaction so that you can actually scroll through the transactions as they happen. And then underneath that, you can see the actual packets. So each individual event is listed in the event view, which is the very bottom view here. So you can see that I've selected the read attributes transaction. You can see a little blue bar over here on the left-hand side, and then underneath that, you can see in the event view a bracket showing all of the events associated with that transaction, and that is part of the Ember Desktop network analysis tool. Next slide, please. So this is a similar view to the Ubilogics Ubiqua network analysis tool. It's another tool that was used at the test event. So we have multiple tools that are giving us multiple views of what's going on in the network for any given network interaction. And this gives us a much more robust view of what's happening and leads to much better interoperability for the devices within the network. And the Ubilogics Ubiqua tool gives you a similar map view on the upper right-hand corner, and then underneath that in the bottom left-hand corner you can see the actual events. So it's similar to Ember Desktop, but it's another company with another tool that's available. Next slide, please. So then for the application implementation, well, I'm going to speak about what we specifically have done at Silicon Labs. We have provided what we call the application framework. And the application framework is a set of XML and C code that sits on top of the stack and is offered as open source to our customers. And it hides all of the application details from the developer. So while the source code is there for them to look at, and they can actually inspect exactly how we handle all of the different transactions associated with Zigbee, they also have the ability to hit the ground running with their application in a very short period of time. And if they want to, they can only be concerned about the specifics of their application. So if I was developing a light, I would be concerned with how do I turn on and off my light. And they simply tie the hardware into the software, and their application is basically done. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? We take all of the specification details and we encode them into XML. So all of the attributes are encoded in XML, all of the commands, all of the clusters, they're all encoded in XML, and that is loaded into our App Builder tool. Now anything that we can't encode in XML is written into the C code, which I'll present next. Next slide, please. So all of the C code goes into what we call plugins. So for instance, there's a reporting feature within Zigbee, and the reporting feature, all of the code is written into a plugin. Now the source for that plugin is provided to our customers, and the plugin provides you the App Builder, provides you a GUI interface that allows you to select that plugin and include it in your application. So when you first start up, you can simply choose what type of device you want to create, and then you can select among the different plugins that you want to include in your device, and you simply hit generate and your application gets created. Next slide, please. So any of the variables associated with the plugin are exposed through the same GUI interface. So for instance, we're looking at here the poll control cluster, a poll control plugin that we created for the poll control plugin, the poll control cluster that Ivan spoke about. And there are a couple of different attributes associated with that plugin that we presented here to the user that they can change and in order to configure their application. Next slide, please. All of this leads to a very modular design which allows the customer to kind of just select the plugins that they're interested in and create their device in a very GUI-centric way, and then generate their application very quickly, and allows them to literally create an application in a matter of minutes. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, you simply go into the GUI interface. You say what type of device you want to create. For instance, I want to create a door lock, or I want to create a smart plug, or a light switch, and then all of the plugins associated with that particular application are automatically selected for you. The application developer then clicks generate, and it generates their application, which they can then load onto the Silicon Labs chip. Next slide, please. Well, that concludes my section of the presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions that anybody has at this time. I'll turn it back over to you, Ravi.
So thanks, Ezra, and thanks to everyone who's been speaking. We now have about 15 minutes where we can take some questions, and folks have been sending in their questions so far, and we appreciate that, so we'll get those started in a few minutes. But before I do that, I want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be made available on the zigbee.org website by the end of the day, in a few hours. So if you are interested in sharing this with colleagues, as we had several questions, that will be available. Everyone who registered for the webinar will get a link to the recording in a follow-up mail, so that will be available to you. Second, we still have time for questions, so if, as we're discussing this, you'd like to ask some more questions, again, feel free to use the chat function. And lastly, I just want to remind you that Zigbee.org is available for more information, including information about Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 and the first certified products. We have a tool where you can search for particular products. So if you're interested in thermostats or sensors, you can actually just search for those right there on Zigbee.org. So we encourage you to use that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with a few questions, and maybe the first one I will ask is for Ivan O'Neill. Ivan, we have a question about thermostats and any kind of heating and cooling applications, and the questioner was asking about Zigbee Smart Energy and how it seems to be very popular, and with the new thermostat and other features in Zigbee Home Automation 1.2. Can you discuss that a little bit, the difference between the standards, and if there are any particular recommendations about developing products in either of the standards?
Sure, I can take that one. So the Zigbee Smart Energy offers, it's really different applications for profiles for different needs, right? So Zigbee Smart Energy is typically been geared towards service providers like utilities who want to offer demand response programs, and the features within Zigbee Smart Energy include a higher level of security, as well as, you know, if you want to control a device, you basically have to send it an event. There is some support for setting temperature set points on HVAC devices, but otherwise the control over the thermostats or other heating and cooling devices is somewhat limited. And with Zigbee Home Automation, you have much greater control and capabilities to interact with the thermostat. You can not only set points, but you can change the mode from heating. You have control over the stages of heating and cooling. You can get feedback and statistics about the thermostat and what it's doing. You can also change fan modes, program schedules remotely. So it's really geared more towards a home automation and home controls market.
Thanks, Ivan. Fabio, I have a question about your pilot programs, very specifically about demand response. Can you talk about whether demand response was used in your program and you know, how that would work with home automation?
Well, as a matter of fact, no, we didn't use demand response so far. In Italy, we don't have yet demand response programs, but let me say that this is just a matter of time. Why? Because in our ecosystem, we have a broadband gateway, we have an access gateway. It is always on. It is connected to the big internet. So we can easily allow our subscribers to participate, to join to such a kind of program. On one side, we can get events, demand response events, and information via the internet. On the other side, we have already implemented through Zigbee Home Automation the connection with the smart meter. So I think we have the hooks, we have the infrastructure, but in Italy we have not yet started with these demand response programs.
Great, but I think the interesting thing is that while that's there, it's really a question of whether the utilities, either electric utilities or telecom providers such as yourself, will end up supporting services like that. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you. Ezra, I'm hoping you can talk a little bit more about the polling cluster. There is a question about, what the major changes are compared to earlier versions of Zigbee Home Automation that really give it longer battery life.
Right. So the poll control cluster allows you to control when a device wakes up in its sleep and wake cycle. So a device previously would have had to have checked in with its parent very frequently in order to interact with any other device on the network, in order for another device to send interaction to the device that's sleeping. Now the poll control cluster allows the device to be configured to wake up and for a given period of time interact with its parent very quickly so that it would become interactive on the network in terms of another device on the network being able to send a message to the sleeping device. And this makes it so that the device doesn't have to be constantly polling its parent every second. It can go to sleep for very long periods of time and then wake up and check in with a poll control manager or a poll control client that would then request that the device wake up and be responsive for a given period of time.
Thank you. Ivan, I'm going to ask this question of you because I know that iControl is very much involved with security systems. There was a question about radio jamming detection and whether that is built into Zigbee Home Automation. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and just overall the reliability features that are built into Zigbee Home Automation and Zigbee Pro.
Sure. So, yeah, Zigbee is a very agile wireless technology and is able to migrate around any barriers that come into its space. So this is how we're able to get really good performance even though there might be Wi-Fi networks operating in the same space. For example, if you've ever been to CES, you don't have any problems demoing Zigbee networks for show participants there. So there's a lot of frequency agility. We can coexist with other wireless signals. And as far as jamming goes, that's a manufacturer-specific capability. It's not built into the base Zigbee Pro specification. But there are techniques and tools out there to deal with radio jamming.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ezra, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit. There's a question about how the simple pairing works in a mesh topology. I think maybe you could go into a little more detail about how that would work across the mesh, the easy mode commissioning.
Right. So a device would be joined with, let's see, so two devices would join on the network, create a binding, so one device creates a binding to another device on the network, and then it will be able to send a message across the mesh to the other device on the network. So the way that works is the first device, the device which would be receiving the message, so for instance the light, goes into what we call an identify mode. And when it's in identify mode, it will respond to requests specifically asking whether it is identifying. So the light would go into identify mode, and then another device on the network would send out what we call an identify query, which asks the light whether it's in identify mode. And the light would then respond saying, yes, I'm in identify mode. With that response then, the originating device or the client device, in this case the light switch, would create a binding to the device that responded. So it would say, I know the long address of the device that responded, and I will create a binding to that device. So such that when somebody turns on and off or off my switch, I will send a message to either turn on or off to that binding, which is created to that device on the network. And that's how specifically bindings work across the mesh topology for the easy mode pairing devices.
Thanks. Fabio, I have a question about the smart meter interface device that you described. Very specifically, this attendee thinks it's working over power line, which I don't believe it's true. So could you just talk a little bit more about how the smart meter interface device communicates with the meter?
Yeah, sure. So the meter interface device, this device that was developed by Enel, it is plugged into any house electricity socket, so it communicates, it gets the information from the meter via the power line, by the power line technology. What is done is that it is commissioned by the distributor in order to be connected to in order to be univocally associated to the customer meter, so to the single customer meter. So there is no need to make any change to the smart meter because it simply continues to send metering information as it already does. So this new device just gets this information and let me say translate, becomes a bridge toward the Zigbee network. So there is nothing special in the device. So it gets the information that are already sent by the meter and provides this information through a Zigbee interface.
Great, thank you.
Does it answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. And if not, if that person who asked that wants to add in more detail, we'd be happy to follow up with you via email afterwards. I have a question I think I will answer, and that is this is a question about the overall certification process. How do you get products certified? And I'll just take a moment to talk about the overall process, which is the same throughout the Zigbee Alliance for any of our standards. Once you have developed a product, if you are a Zigbee Alliance member, you will have access to all the test plans that are used during the certification process. And you can run those test plans yourself to help ensure that it is a interoperable and a product. And once you are confident in that, you can select one of 3 test labs, which have facilities all over the world, to perform the actual product testing. And once that product testing is complete, you submit an application to the Zigbee Alliance describing your product and giving us some photographs. And we pair that up with the test results from the authorized Zigbee test lab. And we usually issue the certification within a week. And that gives you the right to use the Zigbee Home Automation logo on your products. So we encourage certification, obviously, because it's a demonstration that your product will work with all of these other great products in the Zigbee ecosystem. And there is a very explanatory page on this on the Zigbee.org website. Just click on certification and certification process, and you can learn more about that. We just have 1 or 2 more minutes here to take 1 or 2 more questions. I think that maybe I can ask a little more detail of perhaps Ivan, since you spoke initially about it, about the easy mode pairing. There was a question about, Ezra already asked a question about how it works over the mesh network, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how this works with the controllers. Traditionally, Zigbee Home Automation networks have a coordinator and controller, and if you could expound a little bit more on how easy mode works with that, I would appreciate it.
Sure. So really, easy mode is designed to be used without controllers. So again, you have a couple of light switches or a light bulb and light switch. You have a temperature sensor and a thermostat. Really, any 2 devices, and you can put them both into pairing mode, and they'll find each other and create a peer-to-peer network without the use of a controller. Now, when you have a centralized controller come into the mix, say the homeowner or the user wants to upgrade their system, then you bring the centralized gateway in and it, put it into pairing mode, and you push the buttons on the easy mode devices, and they'll find each other again and create a new network that's managed by the controller, and it then takes over things like security and routing and all that stuff. I think that's the answer to the question.
I think so too, and I think the main point there is that while controllers are important, it really simplifies the installation as people want to grow their connected home networks. And you'll obviously have a controller and can do things with that, but you'll also be able to associate things directly device to device. So thank you for that. Well, I have 5 minutes until the top of the hour. We want to be respectful of your time. I just want to remind you that the webinar, I think we'll close off the questions. We do have some other questions that we weren't able to get to, or that maybe have been slightly different from questions that we answered. So we will be following up with attendees with responses via email. If you submitted a question, we can get the reply from our experts who've been on the webinar and get follow up with you via email. In the meantime, I just want to thank our three speakers today who not only devoted their time today, but have worked very hard over the last couple of years to make Zigbee Home Automation 1.2 a reality. And on behalf of the Zigbee Alliance, I want to thank all of our attendees for dialing in today. Thank you so much, and have a great day.